Stigma is a very peculiar 1972 movie with none other than Miami Vice's own Philip Michael Thomas, who plays a black doctor going to some or the other backward town. Upon arrival, he realized that his predecessor and mentor was dead and that he was the only physician available. Unfortunately for him, people don't really like black people, but that doesn't stop him from investigating some strange things happening. You might think that this is some kind of horror film like The Wicker Man or something, but I must disappoint you. At the end of the road, this movie is pretty much a very long commercial to make sure that, hold on to something, to make sure that you won't get the sexually transmittable disease called syphilis. Yes, syphilis. It's no wonder that there's no mention of this in most online references and that they only refer to a dangerous epidemic. Now, in truth, syphilis is a serious thing, but it's not something I think of when I hear dangerous epidemics. When I think of dangerous epidemics, I think about Ebola or something, but alas, Stigma has some very memorable characters and scenes in it, and it would be a much more interesting movie if the sinister thing on the island was something different than syphilis. This isn't the best movie, but the journey towards the end is so inspiring and a roller coaster of emotions that you would be amiss to see it once. At the end, I was confused whether I saw a TV film or a high school educational film or after school special. Check that. The Spin of Night is a 2021 rotoscope Netflix animation reminiscent of the great works of Ralph Bakshi and heavy metal. It's a story about a naked woman walking through a tundra-like landscape who is wearing blue leaves around her neck, without freezing her nipples off, which are shown. She tells the story of what happened to her, and subsequently the world. Spine of Night is set in a medieval high fantasy setting where lords are cruel and religion is used for its power over the population. When a man tortures and rapes the naked woman and steals her power, he uses the blue leaves and their magic for evil purposes. Cause of course men are evil and all that patriarchy stuff, I guess. Lots of things happen before the movie ends and it's quite the trip, but there's one big problem for me. That problem is the way it looks. Spine of the Night has some extremely beautiful backdrops and scenery, but the way the characters look is just plain ugly. They don't even match the backdrop and do not have any shading on them. It's one color per element and the rotoscoping at times is pretty awful. Especially the mouths. One can say that Bakshi's wasn't perfect either, and this is true, but the disconnect between the foreground, so to speak, and backdrop are just too staggering in this movie. I wish it was done more pretty, but after reading up on something, I'm not quite sure this style was intended. Apparently a Windows update was almost responsible of deleting the whole movie. Regardless of the fact that you always keep backups, preferably in a cloud, you also either update your goddamn computer or turn it off so shit like this doesn't happen. The posters for this animation look amazing and I wished it looked like that in the movie too, but it doesn't. And somehow, and I could be wrong, I think they didn't have enough time to make it like that. A shame. The story is okay. It's violent, bloody, doesn't shine nudity and heavy themes, but it just looks like shit. Check that. Naked Singularity is John Boyega's attempt to be relevant after Disney screwed him over during the dreadful Star Wars sequel trilogy. The movie offers something spectacular and thoughtful, but then they pretty much drop that and go off to do other things, bringing up the nonsense they spoke about earlier here and there during the movie. Boyega plays an idealistic public defender who is a little bit tired of losing in court and seeing young black men thrown in jail for misdemeanors. He is on the verge of being disbarred, and then the weird stuff comes up that goes nowhere. The thing is, the universe is collapsing around him. There's some metaphysical talk about multiple universes, causality and all that jazz, and the gist of it is that whenever someone does something, there's a zillion other universes where the same thing happens but with different outcomes, so they decide to perform a heist and for some reason hope that they are in the universe where the heist works despite the plausibility of them getting away with it. An interesting concept, right? Imagine a heist movie combined with Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow, where Tom Cruise respawned every time he died in a war with aliens. Having a heist set in this environment would be interesting. Add in some Inception or Paprika-like visuals and you got a doozy of a movie. But number, it's all talk and it doesn't go anywhere. The cast is great. The script wants to do something but doesn't go anywhere. Seriously missed opportunity here. Hell, Boyega even has a samurai sword in the poster. It's used for a few minutes in the movie. Come on. Check that. The Red Ghost is the titular character in this Russian World War II movie about a Russian sniper who sets out to kill as many Germans as possible. At least, that's the premise. We get a little of him at the start, but then he pretty much ghosts the movie and disappears for a while so we can meet our friendly German soldiers and their not so friendly blonde-haired German stud of an officer. I guess it's fine to get to know the people who will probably get killed by the Red Ghost, but it takes almost half the movie of a band of Germans talking about mundane stuff before something happens. There's a little side plot about a pregnant resistance girl, but that's equally boring really. Eventually, however, the action begins and there's pretty much shooting all the time, which is fine, but it was a little too late. The Red Ghost is competently made and dual lingual with Russian and German being used. Some of the German dialects sound a bit weird, but that's easily ignorable. I'd have preferred a little bit more Red Ghost, however. Like a World War II Russian John Wick killing Germans left and right. I understand the difficulties of this, however, seeing a sniper isn't really an action-packed profession, but still, American Sniper did it, so why Red Ghost couldn't is beyond me. A little less emphasis on characters we don't want to care about and a little bit more on those we want to like would have been welcome. Smash that. Revolver is an Italian movie from '73 that is quite the treat. It's a gritty crime story about a prison official whose extremely beautiful wife, played by Agostina Billy, gets kidnapped by a certain individual in order to break out a convict from his prison. Of course he won't just simply do this willy-nilly, but with his back against the wall he will have to weigh the life of his wife against his conscience. Things get a little bit more complicated when the convict attempts to convince him that he has nothing to do with it. What follows is not only a cat-and-mouse game between the hard knock-hailer and the manipulative convict, but also between the entities that kidnapped his wife. Revolver is a tense movie and it masterfully shows the predicament the guy is in. He wants to be the hero, he wants to kick their ass and kill his way towards her, and he does, but there are consequences in this world, both for him, his wife and the bystanders, and unlike most revenge flicks, he actually wants to have a life after this ordeal, and that is the great part about this movie. Everyone can say they can do this or that, and perhaps impulsively they would, but the intelligent man knows that after the folly of war there will still be a world to live in. Go watch Revolver. It's great stuff. Check that. Satanic panic was a real thing back in the day, where people were worried that children and other easily influenced individuals would take to the dark side and become minions of Satan to wreak havoc upon the world. In this 2019 movie, no one probably ever heard about a suburban satanic cult that is introduced when a very unlucky girl gets sent to deliver her pizzas in the neighborhood. Being a virgin, she immediately is of interest to the cult and gets into quite the trouble. I like satanic movies. I like the lore, I like the psychological stuff. I have the Satanic Bible and I thought this movie would be at least okay. Unfortunately, it's infantile bullshit created by people who prefer the mockery type of movies instead of actually delving into something that is genuinely scary. Instead, we get the Kardashians doing a satanic mass after reading an article about it in Cosmopolitan or whatever magazine fits the bill. It inserts humor that falls flat. It mentions sex without doing shit with it. There's blood without gore. The occult stuff isn't magical enough, and we get housewives bickering about who gets the power. Making a movie about Satan and mentioning Baphomet together with murder and whorefucks doesn't cut it. And at least use the pantheon of real demon instead of inventing one. Samael. The fuck I assess that? Why not use Samael? I'd have been much more interested in a movie about occult Luciferianism and Satanism in Hollywood, but I guess that hits too closely to home. Smash that. David Brent, the annoying but tragic attention-whoring boss from the British series The Office, is back. Now working as an underling at another company, he once again is followed by a documentary crew as he tries to enter show business. He buys a crew, buys a band and goes on the road with his rapping not really friends trying to make it big. Life on the Road is a funny movie with a very distinct Ricky Gervais feel. Gervais plays a very annoying character who overcompensates his lack of friends with being overly comedic and arrogant. When the movie starts, you quickly find the character annoying, though funny. But as the movie progresses and the non-verbal language by other people and Brent himself is more and more clearer, it becomes a very introspective movie about loneliness and friendship. I really liked this movie and think it's even better than The Office that I have seen a long time ago. What was most surprising about it really was the fact that the songs played by Brent and his band are actually good. So good that I went to search the soundtrack and of course found it on YouTube, much to my enjoyment. So now I'll be playing the songs while I am on the road with my car, thinking fondly about what life can give with real friends. Check that. The Invisible Maniac puts a spin on the Invisible Man story and shows us a perverted and immoral professor trying to become relevant by creating an invisible potion. After he gets mocked by his peers and students, he snaps and things get a bit more violent than you would expect. The Invisible Maniac feels like a combination of weird science and the Lovecraftian story Reanimator. After seeing the covers, I expected a light late 80s sex comedy about a guy having a good time being invisible in a college dorm. Technically this happens, but it's not light-hearted at all. The movie is filmed quite dark and feels like a horror movie, but the horror is very light. This disconnect between comedy and horror is weird, and balancing it all in between is detrimental to the movie. It veers a little bit more to horror near the end, but by then we have had several scenes that aren't as fun as it could be. Maybe I'm tainted by the covers, and maybe it would be different when I expected a sort of sarcastic reply on 80s college comedies and turning it on its head. Invisible Maniac isn't the worst movie I've seen, and I think I'll appreciate it more without the bias I created with the posters, but it needed a little bit more comedy or horror. The main character isn't pervy enough and isn't violent enough, despite plenty of ass and tits and violent deaths near the end. I think this movie is one of those rare gems that actually needs a reboot. Get to work on it. Check that. The Sex Thief is a corny 70s movie about a thief who just happens to be so charming that he can have sex with the women he's stealing from. If that doesn't work, he just pulls down his pants and the lady slides off the bed, seeing his apparently well-endowed member. An insurance officer and the cops get involved as the women tell widely varying tales of the man in the media and set up a dastardly plan to catch the sex thief. As you can tell, this movie is a soft-core near spoof sex comedy. On top of that, it's from the 70s, so expect plenty of hair. Although some people might not mind that, don't think that this is an erotic movie. Besides breasts and butts appearing in plain view, even a little dick. The sex scenes are ridiculous, as you can see the actor humping the bed instead of the woman he's on top on. It's all quite silly and the plot is equally ridiculous. Suffice to say that this would not happen in real life. I can't really recommend this movie, but I would be amiss to mention that this is a movie you should at least experience once. Drop that. A rundown crime-laden city. A man living in the city helping those who need and don't need his help. The cops are on strike and nowhere to be seen. A bunch of hoodlums raging, taking it too far in an underground gay bar. Bodies drop and one man runs for his life. What happens next is pretty much as expected. The pursued man finds refuge at the gentleman's home and the hoodlums decide to go all assault on Precinct 13 on their ass. His cronies with weapons versus a man and his family having only their wits and survival instinct. Siege is a delightful little movie, much like Precinct 13 but turned on his head. There's not a whole lot to say about the movie, but it's tense, well made and fun despite its heavy content. Siege is simple but effective, a David vs. Goliath film about good versus evil, and the slightly expected ending will have you chuckle or clasp your fist. Smash that.